We all know that the Rogers Company began as a head manufacturer tucking and fitting hide heads for banjos and drums. This practice actually continued through the Covington era of the 1960s, but upon the advent of plastic drum heads, Rogers factory-applied heads were supplied by Remo while still using some in-house hide heads simultaneously. You can see in the early Covington era catalogs it would state, "plastic heads unless otherwise specified." This offer continued through the 64 catalog and was gone by the 67 catalog, though calfskin heads were indeed still available in the 67-68 catalog. Let's take a look at some of the factory-issued heads of the Rogers Covington era. An oval badge heat stamp was used in the early Covington years. You'll see this stamp on a majority of the heads I own. This first set of heads are an early to mid-1950s calfskin 20-inch bass drum heads. These were clearly on a drum at some point based on the bearing edge formed into the hide, but they were definitely not used much, if at all. If you put your nose right up to the heads, you could smell the hide. When these type heads are wet down, the smell can be quite unpleasant. Notice the wide plastic flesh hoop and the superbly executed tuck job done at the Rogers factory. The earliest plastic heads have the same wide plastic flesh hoop. It was prone to cracking and I would assume did not hold the glue as well as the eventual metal design. The oval stamp heads that read Weather King to me feel to be the exact same head as the ones that just have the oval logo, and in today's weights would fit somewhere right between an Ambassador and a Diplomat. These are without a doubt single ply heads. The heads stamped All Weather and Weather King A1 are a heavier weight, 2-ply heads. A coated top with a clear second ply. The weight feels more comparable to an Emperor or maybe even slightly heavier. The all-weather heads differ from the Weather King A1 only in surface texture. The Weather King A1 feels like your basic coated head, where the all-weather has a different color tint, feels slightly more smooth and more synthetic for lack of a better term. Almost like an early attempt to more imitate a calfskin. After the oval stamp logo came this hollow R screen-applied logo. Many don't realize how early this logo began to appear, but as you can see by these 1963 Powertone ads, it indeed was used then. Notice the B&B lugs on the Powertone. It was also the logo used on the 64R catalog that was printed in 1963. I have a theory that this logo came into play as early as late 1962, but that's for another video. All of the hollow R heads I have are the same Ambassador type weight. Around this time of 63-64, Rogers began to use different logo bass drum heads. The large R logo heads, like the oval stamped heads, were installed on both front and back of the drum at the factory. There were a few different versions. There was a screened version of both the hollow R and solid R. Then there was the most common water transfer version of the solid R. This is a factory screened hollow R logo on this 1964 Mercury bass drum. These two on the left are factory water transfer decals, and the bass drum on the right is a modern vinyl transfer decal. Of course, these are not the only logos that left the Covington factory on bass drums. There were many like this script logo and all the others you see in pictures. In the late 1960s, Rogers offered what they called color flake drum heads. These heads were as well made by Remo and were just Remo sparkle tone heads with a new name and a Rogers sticker applied. These heads, as far as weight, in my opinion, are comparable to an Evans hydraulic. This is a factory issued Rogers color flake in silver sparkle with the water transfer decal. Later on in the early Fullerton days, Rogers switched to a smooth white front head still wearing the water transfer decal. This is an example of one of those heads. Covington factory heads, especially oval heat stamped heads that aren't completely thrashed, are getting harder and harder to find. I'd love to see what you have.